You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
This podcast is presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who have been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com, and then definitely follow them on Instagram for all the information that you need, because I'm sure that's where you follow us as well, at oklahomahof. Let's get into today's episode. Well, we're back. You're back.
It's good to have you back. Thank you for having me.
It's... we've had you on first. It's been over a year now. Talk about Deadcenter was one of the first episodes, and then we did with Grey.
Yes.
Almost maybe 6-7 months ago.
Yes.
And now we're back to talk about what you've done after Deadcenter, and now previously just chatting away, talking before we were recording about the column you write and things that are coming out this year. But for everybody listening that hasn't gone back and listened to our original interview, which I'll post in the description, the number of that, give everyone a little 5-minute. Who is Lance McDaniel, and how do we get to here?
Well, great. Well, so
Is 5 minutes enough?
No, I can do it in 2 sentences. I'm from Alva. So I grew up in Alva, which is in the northwest part of the state, which you know, obviously, and was there until I was 13, and I feel like the movie I just made is kind of a direct reflection of the fact that I was raised, exposed to the arts, exposed to different cultures, and given not only appreciation of different people, but an understanding that we're all the same and that we all, and so I believe I learned a lot of that in Alva. And so for me, my growing up there was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. And there was an Alva Boys Choir led by a guy named Fred Newman, where all the I think it was 3rd through 6th graders got to go, and you traveled all over southern Kansas, and you went to rest homes and churches and sang. Yeah. And it's amazing how many Alva people have really great jobs here in the city, and they're not all singers. There's judges and lawyers and corporate people and a lot of doctors. And I think the confidence you gain as a kid by going and singing with a group of people and in front of all these people you don't know, I just have to believe that mattered. And so growing up in Alva was probably one of the most formative things that happened to me. We then moved down to Oklahoma City, and I went to Edmond, and then went to high school at Purcell and graduated from Heritage Hall. And so I did a kind of the sampler platter of Oklahoma education.
You get to see all of it.
Public and private. And all of those were great. And I think I really benefited from the fact that I had awesome teachers at every single school I went to, and that really cared about me as a person. And then for college, I went to Stanford, and I would say that's another place where my mind was kind of blown apart and then pieced back together. And it took those ideas that I learned in Alva to a new level, which is, okay, you're what is going on with race in America? And I was in school when Rodney King incident happened, and so when he got beat. And so I feel like that was kind of the second place where my mind was really kind of blown and expanded. And then was an internet consultant for about 12 years and built the first website for Levi's and Starbucks and Star Wars and a lot of those really fun ones. And then at 34 decided I really wanted to be a director. And so I started over, and I got a job as a free intern for Grey Frederickson, Oscar winner and fellow podcaster.
Yeah.
And Grey gave me a job, and so I moved from New York to Los Angeles and worked on Cloud 9, which was the first movie from his production company, Graymark, which he started with John Simonelli and Mark Stansberry. And then I worked on $1 Million Baby with Gray's friend Albert S. Reddy, and that was totally awesome. And then Gray said, "Will you move back home? Because I'm going to do a series of low-budget scary movies." And so I moved home to work on Graymark movies, and I've been home 15 years. And I've worked on independent film the entire time, but I took a 10-year, not break, but 10 years I worked at Deadcenter. So as you know, so I ran the Deadcenter Film Festival. And what I find, what I love so much about Deadcenter is it made me feel more at home than any place in the city when I moved home. So when I came back in 2005, Oklahoma City was very different. We didn't have the park or the river. There were a lot of things that were still just coming. And Deadcenter was one of those bright, shining spots that was, here's 100 different stories from around the world. So it didn't matter kind of what your opinion was. There was going to be some stuff that you loved and stuff that you did not like. And then you would go to these parties and debate with people why you didn't like it. And it was just so exciting and engaging. thing. And it really was the first time I had actively sought out festivals as fun, because I'd been to other festivals, but in other cities. But it was, and so I volunteered for Melissa Scaramucci for 7 years, or for 5 years rather, in programming. And so I would watch almost every movie that would come in for several years, and that was such a great education because I was new at filmmaking.
Yeah.
And so to be able to watch hundreds of movies a year that were short films and features and everything really kind of helped shape the kind of stuff I wanted to do. And so then when I was at Dead Center, and they grew Dead Center into a super cool, nationally recognized event before me, and so I think it's important for people to know that what Khaki and Melissa did with the festival that Jason Justin Floyd founded was they turn it into something super solid, so that when I came on in year 10, I had this existing entity that I could then package and market differently, and so it wasn't, I didn't invent the wheel. What I did was figure out a way to package that wheel and sell it, and create education programs that would allow us to expand across the state, and start training and doing more rural film classes and stuff like that. So I'm very proud of the 10 years I was at Dead Center, and I think we accomplished a lot and we grew a ton. But I think that is a direct result of how awesome the people before me were creating something that was so interesting and possible to sell. And then I stepped down in July. And after 10 years, and part of it was I'd been there 10 years. The organization is 20, and I thought, well, that's a pretty clean break.
Cut,
what am I going to run it for 20 years or 30? Like, is this how I'm dying? And so I kind of felt like Alex Picard Davis should not have to be 50 to run this thing. She's smart enough, she's super capable, she's awesome, and so she and I talked about it for about a year and a half. So she knew first.
That's good.
And I'm like, but if you want this job, then let's figure out what you need to do. So the board, because you work for the board of directors.
Right.
Once I'm gone, you work for them, you don't work for me. And she got very active in National Film Festival Alliance, and is now the vice president of the board there. And that has been such a blessing for Dead Center, and especially when COVID hit, because when theaters shut down, she was immediately on a call every other day with other festivals from Seattle to Sundance to wherever else, saying, what are the technologies? How do we get this going? And so we were one of the first people to fully use Eventive, just because of our timing in June. And so a lot of the success we had with our 20th anniversary was because Alex was involved nationally, is technical. And so I felt like it was a great time to leave. I think the virtual festival was a wild success and super interesting. And then, and 2 weeks later, I got a call about the fact that Race Dance's Hip Hop Nutcracker, which is a dance show that's performed at OCCC and used to be at McGinnis, is not going to be able to happen because they go into Oklahoma City public schools and teach dance, and then that's who makes up the dance show. Well, they couldn't do it because of COVID. And so Chop, who's the founder, said, will you help me make a movie? And I'm like, you betcha, that I'm obsessed with this thing. And then separately, a guy named Heath Hayes, who works for the Department of Mental Health here in Oklahoma, said, Lance, there is some funding that we're trying to figure out ways to decrease the stigma around mental health and addiction. And I had done a movie in Alva called The Homecoming Trilogy about a woman who gets out of prison and dies because of her addiction, and it was all told through dance, and it's not a very happy movie, but poignant. And he saw it, and he was like, would you consider telling a different story, which is that what if that woman got the resources she needed? And I'm like, well, great. So what we came up with is Finding Carlos, which is based on Race Dance Company's Hip Hop Nutcracker, and instead of Clara, it's Carlos who meets his father for the first time, and that's what their dance show is about. And so we took that and expanded it to, and their Carlos was about 6 or 7 years old. We made ours a teenager who's struggling with anxiety and whose parents are addicts, one recovered, and it's him trying to kind of find his way in the world against the backdrop that the father is this world-renowned choreographer. And so there's 11 dance numbers all based on Nutcracker songs, and it's awesome. For me, it's the best movie. It's the most fun I've had making a movie. I think it's the best movie I've made. And the spirit of a bunch of people coming together during the pandemic to make art about helping others allowed a really good spirit throughout it. And
So
was that
5? 8. So we did. That was good. Thank you for watching. So you knew back to leaving Dead Center. You knew, right? Not just that year, you knew a year and a half before, so it was like, okay, you were looking, I guess, transitioning and looking for what's next. But did you know, until this Finding Carlos opportunity came to you, was there anything else that had, because of COVID, had to take a back seat? That was, because you didn't think, COVID happened, and you're like, a year prior to that, you're thinking, I'm about to quit not quit. About to step down from Deadcenter, and I'm going to have all this stuff. And then you're in the process of thinking what's next, and COVID happens, and everybody's plans are no longer.
Right.
And then Finding Colors comes up. So I'm interested to know what was on the plate that was not on the plate after, right?
To me. I am... and this may be terrible for your viewers. I knew I needed to leave Deadcenter.
Yeah.
I did not know where I was going after that.
Okay.
And that is an unusual situation to be in. And it wasn't I knew because it was negative or I was sick of it. I felt like 10 years was exactly how long I should be at this organization in order for it to get fresh blood. Because film, unlike a lot of arts, film is constantly evolving. You know, I mean, the technology changes every single day. And so to have one, like, there just isn't the need to have the continuity that I think, like, if you're running the Philharmonic, and you've got 150 union musicians. I mean, like the continuity of leadership certainly is a little more important. But when you're running a film festival that's managed by 3 or 4 people, what you need is new, fresh ideas. Right. And I hadn't run out of them, but I was like, hey, it's time for someone else. So so because I was coming from that perspective, I wasn't as focused on what was next. And I think that was probably scary for my family and scary for other people. I had saved money, so it wasn't like I was, worried about running out of money. But I was just like, I feel like I need to be doing something else. And my heart is, I want to make movies. Okay. I didn't know if there was any money to make movies. I didn't know if there was any money for me to make movies. And so there are so many factors that you can't control in making movies when you're seeking investors that I basically was just like, and so I turned down some jobs that I got. And a couple of good ones, some job offers, because I was like, I'm not leaving I'm leaving for a reason because I want to tell stories, and I'm not quickly going to jump into something that keeps that from happening. Yeah. So for me to kind of jump without a net and to land on this project 2 weeks later was an absolute godsend. And it would not have happened if not for COVID, because Race Dance would have had their show, and the mental health money would not have been freed up to get people who were at home dealing with anxiety. And so all the factors that made the job market terrible for everyone else came together to make something really special for me. Or not special for me, that allowed me to be a part of something really special.
That's really cool, isn't it? Like, kind of freeing that you didn't really know what was going to happen, but by having the power in you to turn down those jobs, right? And think, I spent 10 years somewhere, I'm not about to spend another 10 somewhere else doing something that I kind of want to do, but I don't want to do, because I want to give it my all and go make movies. Right. And then this opportunity comes in.
It was great. And so I quit as an internet consultant, and I was a global vice president. I mean, I had an amazing job, made tons of money, and quit and became a free intern on a beach volleyball movie. And it was, one of the best things I ever did for myself. Yeah. And so because of that, I had an example internally of, you've started your life over before, and then moving after being gone for 16 years or 18 years, coming back to Oklahoma was a big decision, and it turned out to be the best decision I've ever made. Like, I believe moving home to Oklahoma is the best decision I made. Yeah. And so every time I've made a major decision, it's turned out pretty great. So I wasn't that scared.
Why do you think it was so easy? Not easy, but why do you think you were so comfortable to make those decisions? Because a lot of people listening or watching might say,
you're a dumbass.
You're a global vice president. You're working for giant like Starbucks and Star Wars are not small companies. On the internet side too, with the whole tech boom and everything, and money's great, and you're having a great time. You live in San Francisco at the time.
Well, London. Yeah.
London. Okay, London. Having a blast. Yeah. And then you think, you know what? I'm going to take a total life change, and I'm going to go chase a dream and do something that I really want to do. Right. It takes what did mom and dad say?
What is awesome about my family is they have been absolutely supportive the entire time. And so I think it is not like I'm ever jumping without I said jumping without a net. That is not a fair assessment of the privileged life I lead. In that there is a net all over the place. I could move it with any of my family members and we get along great. And so I do have a net. And so I think that part of the reason I'm able to be so bold is because I'm not scared of failure. Sure. And a lot of that is just the natural comforts I have from having a nice family that does well. But also the confidence I got based in Alpha. I mean, like the confidence you get as a kid and my mom and dad I was going to say obedient to us, were very clear to us that we could do anything we wanted.
Right.
And if we, go try out for that play, try out for that football team, try out for this. And we were constantly pushed to try everything.
Yeah.
And I think to a frustrating extent, sometimes you're like, I don't want to do this. It was like, I'm sorry, you can choose at 18. Until 18, we're choosing for you and you're doing all of it.
Yeah.
And I think that trying things you're not good at, and that's what I think people have gotten away from now is, my daughter's good at dance, so she's a dancer at 9.
Yeah.
And you're like, really? You think at 60 she'll be a dancer? Because why don't you let her try other things? And
Right.
so for me, I feel like by being pushed in to do stuff that we were scared to do or not always great at, because if you're in the choir and the football team and the band, you're probably not great at all of them.
Yeah.
And so you have to get used to being a team member and not being the star.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the confidence that we got from that has allowed me to make bolder choices. And I'm single. So I mean, all of you out there that have a family, this would seem irresponsible, but I don't. Right. And so I think part of that was, okay, if I don't have the natural trappings that are keeping people from living their ideal life, why am I not living my ideal life?
Yeah. You see it as a new adventure, and I'm going to go do this, and having that kind of whatever, if it goes down the pan and the worst thing happens, I can always move home, right?
Right.
And that's kind of how I felt when I moved to the States too. It was like, I can always move home. My home's always going to be there, regardless if it's, I'm still going to have a bedroom. Hopefully, when I went home for the first time, I was like, Mum, you still have my room, right? But you said something really important there too. Was back to Alva, a mutual friend of ours, Andrew Holder, said the same thing. Everything comes back to the arts, right? And being in the arts, whether it's at Alva or another school or another town or whatever it is, being in the arts helps you grow as a person so much,
right?
Because of all the things you try, and standing on a stage. I mean, there's people who live 80, 90 years and they hate being on stage their entire life,
right?
It's just a fear that we have. But once you're under the lights for the first time and you get used to that and you get comfortable, you grow, and then you're in other places, and being in conversation and speaking to people on stage or not on stage is not a big thing anymore, because you've been under the lights.
Exactly.
And when you're up there, you can't see anything anyway.
Right. Well, exactly.
You see the front few rows and that's it.
Well, and it's interesting because growing up, choir was mandatory. And I actually loved that because and I was thinking this while you were talking, just the idea that you're sitting in a room and there's 30 people singing the same note and you have to adjust your note so you're not the wrong one.
Yeah.
And you realize that the person 2 down is always right, so you listen to them a little bit more. It changes the dynamics of how you're looking at people, because those same awesome singers probably aren't the best football player and maybe not this, so it gives people the ability to try out different things without having to be the star. And I do think that really helped me, the teammate part of it, and I've once you have success at starting your life over, you're like, okay, I can do it again.
Yeah.
And after 10 years, I'm like, well, I'm not just jumping place to place. It's a decade between.
Right. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And I love that, like, everything that you've done kind of comes together and you put towards. It's not like you're trying something completely different.
Well, exactly.
Right? Everything kind of comes together.
Well, exactly. And it's interesting because when Kim Haywood and I started the education program, or basically redefined it and started going to 30 rural schools every fall, it was as exciting to me as flying around as a consultant in London. I mean, very different, obviously, when you're flying to Copenhagen, this and the other, but ultimately as a job, it's awesome the first time. But after you go there Tuesday through Thursday, every day, every week for 7 weeks or whatever, you're like, okay, I'm still, pushing paper. But the skills I gained from being able to go to a room in a different country and blah, 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 is pretty similar to going to Laverne High School. These are a bunch of, 15-year-olds that don't know me or care. And so...
Almost harder to go talk to the 15-year-olds than it is to go to... How do you engage them?
And it's so funny, and it's so awesome because, I grew up in Northwest Oklahoma, so when I go to Laverne, I know the teacher, I have family in Laverne, Woodward, Sealing, all these great places. And so to go in and see how sweet the kids in Oklahoma are has been almost the most rewarding part of it, because you hear like, oh, education's down, this, that, and the other. And then you go into school, and every single school, the kids were great.
Yeah.
Every single school, they're smart kids and fun, and it's diverse, and they're kind to each other. And so you're like, okay, well, I mean, there are problems that need to be solved, but it's not the people. It's just like systemically we got to solve education. But it was great because every teacher I met was fabulous and asked me to come do our program because they wanted the kids to be exposed to something different. And so I've only had really positive experience traveling around Oklahoma, and that's what kind of made it feel like when I was a consultant, because you're just like, okay, it's the same process of going into a room with people you don't know and learning to find something cool about them.
Yeah. So back to the movie.
Yes.
Like 2 weeks after Deadcenter, you get this phone call, this opportunity. Heath calls you and says, hey, we might have some money. And it's let's do it. Why not? This is
yes. Well, so
what
then the COVID money changed because so right after we had that talk, Governor Stitt got COVID, and then that money was redirected. And so the fact is, the funding came from different sources and it started. Sure. But I met with Melissa and I met with, I believe, 11 or 12 advocacy groups from the Oklahoma Mental Health Association of Oklahoma, Depression, Bipolar, Suicide Prevention. And our goal was to meet with all these advocacy groups and see how we could take some of the things that they're dealing with and their constituents are dealing with and fuse that into our story. Yeah. And so the movie itself is very informed by all the different advocacy groups that then helped pay for the movie. Yeah. And the fact is, it is very much a Christmas dance movie, but at its core, it's a pretty serious drama about a boy and his father. And I feel great about that. I feel like we're telling a positive message about we all have mental health problems. Yeah. It's how do we acknowledge those? How do we get help for those? And so, so it was exciting. Now, I brought Melissa Scaramucci on as soon as I had a conversation with because she's my co-writer and she's brilliant. And this was probably the best experience we've had writing a script, even though we only had like 2 or 3 weeks. So we start in July, we write it by August, audition, start filming in September, finish October 16th, and have it in theaters by December 3rd.
That's
4th.
Amazing, isn't it?
Yeah. So normally that's a year-long process that we did in 3 months. And part of it was I've worked on 21 movies, and so I know the process pretty well, and I also know the people that are efficient. But a lot of it is just we brought people together that made it happen. And so it's like I think I'm not an auteur, and I know auteurs. I'm not. I think I'm a good leader of creative people going in the same direction. Yeah. And I think that's kind of my skill as a director. And in this film, with 70 dancers, 12 choreographers, and a really intense mental health message, I was lucky to have so many amazing partners make it happen.
And it's shot in Oklahoma City?
It's all shot in Oklahoma. We're in Medicine Park. We're out at Concho. Because of COVID, we had a 13-person crew instead of a 75 one. Yeah. And so the gaffer was his own assistant. And it still looks great. I mean, I think when you see it, you'll be surprised how beautiful it is with 13 people making it and 0 people grips and electric. I mean, because with COVID, you just couldn't have that big of a set. And everyone and we tried to hire some people that didn't want to do that. That were like, no, I'm not working on that small of a project because it's like a short film. We're like, well, great, then this isn't for you. Yeah. But the people who came on board were awesome. And then we wrote the story such that when you see the credits, there's 70 dancers, but there's never more than 9 at a time. Gotcha. And they're all in different locations. And so all of the dances were rehearsed separately with separate choreographers and dancers, and everyone was tested. And so COVID made a very tricky production. But it was also super interesting because, like, as a problem solver, and I'm a first AD as well. So the idea of how do you schedule all these people so that we don't have more than 12, we never have more than 3 people in a scene unless they're dancing. So the first 3 weeks, we only had one scene that had more than 3 people for the first 2 weeks of filming, and part of that was we scheduled it, because COVID scheduled it that way, so that by the time we got to the dance scenes, we'd done, we were at less risk, and so I don't know, it was awesome. Hee Cha-Poos brings such a beautiful spirit to everything she does that it made and you and I are so a lot of film sets are very male. And very white male. Like in 2005, it was 100% white guys and a couple of women. And on to film sets here. And now they're naturally diverse, just like the world is, which is totally awesome. And Amy Janes and Kim Mott were our production managers. Richard and Amy Janes from Green Pasture Studios. Oh, great. Okay. So they own the studio out in Spencer. And she and Kim were just totally awesome. And then my other producers were and Melissa Scaramucci. And so it was me surrounded by 4 of the nicest women on earth. So even my natural instincts to not be as nice were completely muted by the fact that they were all so sweet. And every time I'd get a little worked up, they're like, everything okay? I'm like, you're right. This is awesome. You're right. Yeah. So it made it so much less stressful because no one was building off each other's negative energy. Right. It was constantly reinforcing, hey, we're blessed to be working on this. We're lucky to be having a job. Right. And so relax. If there's a problem, let's solve it and relax. And, and then we hired Jacob Burns to film it. And he's the sweetest person on earth. And so it just made for a really nice group.
Have such a tight-knit group because of COVID, right? To have, everybody is, like you said, it could have been 75 people. Right. And you always get little pockets of negativity or something pops up, or there's always groups. It naturally gets segregated. Right. With such a tight crowd, that's been really cool.
It was interesting, and it's funny because Yeah, I mean, like the last 2 films I did were short films, and so this was more like a short film crew. And I don't think I don't hope every film does it. I hope we have 150 person crews every time, because I love all of my friends getting work. So it's not about, I'm not trying to push for that, but for this situation during the pandemic, it was the perfect environment, and the partners were just as kind and sweet as possible. It made me a kinder person, and our leads were so great. I mean, it was interesting because we also didn't do a wide audition like normally. You know, I'm working with Chris Freihofer or Ricky Bass or somebody, and just didn't, because we're like, we can't really even do a casting process safely. And here was the main thing. Film actors were getting a lot of work at the time. You know, Reagan was here. You know, so a few months ago, there were a lot of films, and every actor I knew was either auditioning or getting a part in these different movies. Out of Exile, Kyle Quokka Harris's movie had, you know, every manly man in Oklahoma was in that. And it was so funny watching him pose with Adam Hampton and Wilson Novice and all these awesome total studly dudes. And then mine are just like Fabrics and Dan. You know, I was like, wow, we're making literally the opposite movie. We decided, and he asked me to, she was like, hey, our dancers are out of work. So my goal in making the movie is hire dancers. And so we decided, we hired all dancers and theater actors for the most part, you know. So I mean, like, there had been people who had been in a couple of films, but for the most part, we were trying to hire people who were out of work. And so that was very different, you know. So I didn't get to work with a lot of my normal film friends, but we were trying to provide an opportunity for people who could not do their art live. And we think that so I feel really good about that. And what's amazing is how good the actors are. And the lead kid, Maximus White, is from class at SAS. And then his love interest, Layla Rickman, also goes to Classen. And they are just fabulous on camera. And then Michael Andreas plays his father, and he was on Broadway in a show called A Soldier's Play. And that's nominated for 7 Tony Awards this year. And because of COVID, that got shut down, so he was sent home. So COVID, while awful in general, really allowed for things to come together nicely on this movie. You know, he wouldn't have been home from New York, Michael would not have been home from New York. The dance show would have happened. You know, all these different things were just perfect time. You know.
Makes it special, right?
It does make it a special
opportunity, and
it's a special opportunity. And I watched it again last night. I've now watched it probably 40 times. All the way through, and I like it every time because the spirit of it is what we were trying. We were able to convey a nice spirit, and that was the goal.
And a message.
Well, a nice message, which is you are not alone, and there are people here that want to help you if you ask.
So last week, we sat here with JB. JB was telling us all about it. You know, the music in it. You guys collaborate on the music and work together on that, and he plays a part in the movie. And he said that he knew the original Carlos story from school when he was in like high school and stuff.
So Carlos,
which is amazing.
So the original Carlos went to Douglas High School, and he was kind of not flirting around, but basically toying around with gang life, and took a dance class that He Chapu's taught at Douglas High School, and decided not to go into gang because of that class, and went to school, and now he is the director of admissions for Langston University, and is getting his PhD. And so when she created the Hip Hop Nutcracker 8 years ago, she based it on him, and that's why she changed it from Clara to Carlos, because she's like, dance can transform lives, and I've seen it happen. And he is in the movie, and he has a cameo in the movie as kind of the head of the rec center there, and he's awesome. But having him on set and having him come to set and introducing it was like, hey, there is a real Carlos. And art helped real Carlos get his life on track and become a success. And so it allowed every person to be like, oh no, the guy that we're talking about actually lives. And JB is the greatest. I'm glad you just interviewed him, because he is such an awesome collaborator. He brings the perfect spirit to it. And so he helped produce the soundtrack. He's the rapping narrator in the movie, and he's just totally awesome, you know. So it starts with him rapping, and it's very, very fun, and he's just great. So so and he's one of tons of different collaborators. Brand J Jackson, who's a jazz singer over in Tulsa, and who won Black Wall Street's Artist of the Year or Female Artist of the Year. She plays the Sugar Plum Fairy, and so she has a really big role in this. She also sings the kind of one single off the soundtrack, or one of the couple singles. And then Bobby Moffett Jr. is a musician from Tulsa that does the music.
I mean, for everyone listening, you can go to Deadcenter and watch it.
So it's with the funding, our goal. When we applied for the grant, it was we will get it we will find a way to get it to Oklahomans for free during December.
Yeah.
And so, which is a very unusual release strategy. Normally you're like, I'm going to a festival, I'm looking for this, that, and the other. But it's like, no, within the budget, we have paid for the ability to get it out there and advertise it so that if you're in Alva, you can go on your computer and watch it for free at deadcenterfilm.org. And that was very important, not only to our funders, but to me. It was like, well, if we are making a message about positive mental health during a pandemic, we don't want to get it out in 2021. We want to get it out there. And so what we're also very grateful for is Rodeo Cinema and the Oklahoma City Museum of Art. And then there are 12 other theaters around Oklahoma, including the Rialto and Alva and Circle in Tulsa, that are playing the film as it allows. And so I went to 5 screenings this weekend, all 5 at different places, and they were like 30 people screenings. So most of the theaters we love. It is. I wanted Max White to see himself on a big screen because he's a total star. And so it was awesome for me that he got to go to the Museum of Art with his parents and grandparents and cousins and friends and see that he is actually totally awesome in this movie. And so I'm very grateful for the theaters. But the fact is, my parents watched it at home because my parents are 82 and they're not trying to go into public more than necessary. And so our goal is that anyone can see it for free all month. And so it's at deadcenterfilm.org.
That's awesome. So with 2020 being just a complete dumpster fire for the most part, right? TV's actually been decent.
Oh, it's been amazing.
And we before recording, we were talking, you write a column in the newspaper, and there's a lot of really good series and stuff that's come out this year. I was watching Blacklist, and the last, couple of episodes of Blacklist, they had to do anime and stuff like that to figure it out. And at first I'm like, this is horrific. Want to see Raymond Reddington and all that stuff. But it was fine. It worked out fine. But there's been, you mentioned Queen's Gambit, Schitt's Creek, and all these other movies.
The new version of Crown.
Tiger King. And all that stuff. So
it is. What's interesting is that, and this, I noticed this some when I was outside the entertainment industry, but working in the industry, Sundance used to be, I want to sell my film to Sundance and get a theatrical release. And then after Lena Dunham, it was like, I want to sell my film to Sundance and have it turned into a limited series. And so that was because a lot of them were. And so I do think the series and the limited series on streaming services have become absolutely spectacular. And in my mind, as good as the film industry, for sure. Like the stuff I've enjoyed this year has been more television than film, and a lot of that was tons of studios stopped all their films from coming out. So there's some beautiful stuff. What was that? Uncle Paul? There's one that just came out with Paul Bettany.
Uncle Frank,
which is gorgeous, and it's about this gay guy and reconciling his home life, and it was awesome. We saw it at Sundance, and that was one that was going to festivals and then pulled out once it happened, and then I think released on Amazon.
Sure.
But it's been an amazing year for television. What'll be fascinating is to see what happens in fall of 2021 when there haven't been any new productions for the last 9 months.
Right.
So that's what I'm curious about, because the quality. I mean, Queen's Gambit is fabulous looking. It's beautiful. The production design's amazing. The Crown, of course, is just flawless. And so what happens when you don't have those big productions? Because most people have shut down at least for 3 to 6 months. So I'm very curious to see, and I think we'll see a film renaissance, because all the shelved movies will start getting the attention
back out.
And these mini-series that weren't able to film for a few months will be on hiatus.
Yeah, for me, it was like James Bond got stopped, wouldn't it? The new Bond, and then Top Gun as well for me.
Top Gun was the thing I most look forward to in 2020.
I loved seeing the trailers and because of the way that they trained. They were in the planes. That's the way it was shot was so cool, because the original Top Gun, they're not. The acting in this, and Miles Teller's in it. I love Miles Teller. That's awesome. I just thought that's cool to see that, trying to act while you're pulling 4 or 5 Gs in a fighter jet.
Well, it's amazing. And the original Top Gun is one of my favorite movies ever. And I was in high school when it came out and loved it obsessively. And Tom Cruise and all that. And then when I went to college, I think that was the first DVD that had surround sound on it.
Yeah.
Or it was the first movie that I remember we were sitting in someone's room, and when they flew by, it went all the way around the room. We're like, so we watched it a million times. And so that was the movie. I mean, and I love all the Bond movies, but that Top Gun, I was so excited. So when that got bumped, I'm like, oh, wow, there is a pandemic.
It's real.
It's getting serious. I can't see a Tom Cruise movie.
I mean, so tell me about your top stuff that you've watched this year for what's coming out.
for me, the best thing I watched this year that I still keep thinking about was the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary on ESPN that then replayed on Netflix. And I've always just been mesmerized by Michael Jordan, and I am a sports fan, and I go to a lot of Thunder games, but I'm not a wild sports fan. But there was something about Michael Jordan that he was just age-wise, whatever. I thought he was amazing. I bought the shoes, bought in completely. And so to have that definitive documentary come out and hear him talk about everything, it gave me an appreciation for the people that are world class.
Yeah.
Because I think the rest of us who are kind of normal, it's easy. Well, it's easy to judge Ellen DeGeneres.
Yeah.
But have you been the most popular talk show host for 10 years? I bet that is stressful, and I bet you are a bitch backstage. You know, but so you're just like, okay, well, being Garth Brooks, to have that kind of control and being the top selling artist of all time means that you run a tight ship, and not everyone likes running a tight ship, And so for me, I felt like everything I saw in The Last Dance just confirmed that he's the greatest athlete of all time, and he acknowledged that gift and did not accept any less. And to me, that was just awesome. So everyone around him was like, "Yeah, he's really hard to be a teammate with because I wanted to go out and drink because I'm 22 and he won't let you." You're like, "Well, great." So so I thought that was amazing. Tiger King, which I actually liked, and I know a lot of Oklahoma people don't because they thought it made Oklahoma look bad. From an entertainment perspective, that was the most entertaining thing I've ever seen. Every single episode, you're like, "What just happened? What did he do? And so that's great TV. And the fact is, when I was thinking about it, comparing it to the Michael Jackson expose, which was just gut punch. It's just like no matter what happened, it is impossible not to be sick to your stomach. That those kids felt that way, that he was that way, blah blah blah. And so a lot of those, and the R. Kelly, a lot of the gotcha, you're a sexual predator, is just so disturbing that it's like, even though they're well done, it's just hard. Whereas I felt like Tiger King, you're like, okay, here is a really unique, wild frontier guy. From a different era that has forged this really weird life that you can't imagine. In
the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere that just happened to be in our home. And so I think that Oklahomans were sensitive to it, but I thought it was amazing. I think The Crown is fabulous. I think The Queen's Gambit is totally awesome. I think there's been a lot more female-driven dramas and even comedies are just... are ruling the roost, and that's great. All the Reese Witherspoon projects, and HBO and Little Fires Everywhere and Hulu. I've loved all of those. I mean, there's been like that. And the morning show with Jennifer Aniston, that was amazing. And it starts off, and if you haven't seen it, you go in looking at America's Sweetheart, and the drama happens in the very first episode. And so she doesn't have any time to build into it, but you've loved her for so many years that you don't have to. And it was the best use of a star of the year for me. It was just fascinating to see how, of course, I also can't remember if these came out last year or this year, because it's all,
it's all the same.
Just because I see it on Netflix and maybe on HBO 3 years ago. And then Schitt's Creek, I love that Schitt's Creek finally got all the awards and all the attention, because it was the most hilarious, like, kind of cult TV show that then became the most popular. So it's really fun.
I put it off for a long time. My wife was like, she's like, you watched all of it, and I'm like, what is that junk on the it was terrible. And then I love Peaky Blinders, so I was watching Peaky Blinders again at the start of this year, and I've never watched The Office either, which is I don't know why. I just anyway, that kind of humor for me is, I'm from the UK, I have an excuse that I don't like that kind of humor.
Exactly.
But so I made my wife a deal. I said, if you will watch Peaky Blinders with me, I will watch Schitt's Creek. And we'd watch like an episode each way, and in the end, Peaky Blinders won because my wife's like, we have to keep watching this because it's amazing. But now we're all watching Schitt's Creek, and I'm rolling every single time. I
started in the middle of it, and it wasn't working. I mean, I started on a different season, and I just went into it. My friend's like, go back to the first one. I did, and I mean, I loved all the Christopher Guest movies. So Catherine O'Hara and Eugene Levy doing anything is the funniest thing. And so, and the fact that he wrote it with his son, and just like,
good.
It is. If you haven't seen it, it takes a minute to get the tone, but once you do, it's the funniest thing. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah, it's awesome. Coming towards the end of this year, I guess with the opportunity that came to you with Finding Colors so kind of soon, I guess you didn't really have that off time to
really figure out what's next. And a lot of people, family and otherwise, they're like, okay, great, this worked out great. So what's next? And you're like, I literally just made a movie in 3 months, so I'm going to take a break.
Like, I actually want to have some time off now.
I'm going to take a break and write the next one. So what I hope happens is that this is successful enough that we get to make another one, you know, and I believe that we accomplished the goal, which is we made a fun, uplifting movie employing a bunch of Oklahomans that allows a discussion about mental health and addiction in a more positive way, you know, and that was our goal. And yeah, it'd be great if it goes on Netflix or something like that. And we are going to open ourselves up to those opportunities. But our goal was to provide a movie to Oklahoma during this time that was really positive, uplifting.
And you've done it during one of the hardest times, right? Like, I know everything kind of came together, but still, when you go from having 75 people on set to 13, like, that's not easy. Like, everybody, like you said earlier.
Well, just think about this. It requires you to be your own assistant. Yeah. So now when you're saying, hey, can you run and get me that on set? Now that you running and getting, you know, and so it doesn't, not every crew member wants to do that. And certainly not cinematographers stuff. And so we had a crew of people that were excited to make the movie we were making.
Yeah. It's going to be good. I'm excited for next year. I think, actually, as this is going out, my mum actually is getting the vaccine tomorrow in the UK because she's a nurse, so she's like she's one of the first people to get it. Which hopefully, and you know, we get to travel and you know, and do things that we want to do, and you get to have a full crew and all this other stuff, and the opportunities keep rolling in. But I guess next year, would you? Obviously, you'd like the Jones to open, and we can go to concerts again.
Right? I think I'm very excited. Well, I'm super excited for the world to open back up, and partially because, you know, more than half of my friends seemingly own restaurants. Yeah, and amazing restaurants that have to have people eating there to succeed. And so I'm excited for the world. I'm excited for the vaccine. I'm excited for the world to open up. But I hope that what we retain is. What the pandemic did for me, other than finding Carlos, was it forced me to go to public events where I'm speaking to a bunch of people I don't know. Yeah. And spend more time with the people I do know. And so I saw my parents 2 or 3 times a week. We were Zooming. I saw my family. And so my world went from all of Oklahoma to 8 people. But I love those 8 people, you know, and so what I hope happens is I hope I will still have lunch every single Sunday with my parents and spend the afternoon with them and not worry about 1,000 other events that are less important than spending time with my parents, you know. And so for me, it was a good reset. I also have every advantage in the world. I had a job, I have a house, you know, so I don't want to diminish the fact that this has been completely devastating to lots of people. But for my own personal experience, it's been a good reset in that I give, through Deadcenter and otherwise, I put a lot of energy out into the world that was just kind of going out, and it was really nice to be back where I'm with the people that I love the most, my parents, my family and friends, and giving to them because they deserve some of that energy too. Yeah.
All right. So last question: if the world opens back up and you're still, you know, you're taking your time off, which you've well deserved, where are you going first? What are you going to do? And, you know, I guess why would you go there?
So when the world opens back up, my first goal is to go to every restaurant I've been missing. No, I would. My hope in January is to start working on a movie. Okay. You know, so I think I probably won't travel for a while. Like I also don't think I'll get the vaccine for a while. Like I don't see myself in one of those, you know, top tier categories. And so my goal is to continue to use this time as wisely as possible, create new stories, and you know, and if we can do a sequel to Finding Carlos, great. If not, we'll write something else. But my goal is to still stay here in Oklahoma and continue to create. You know, and then it'll probably be a year or so before I start going. I have a lot of friends in New York, and I love New York, but I'm not going there yet.
It's not worth it.
Exactly. I don't need to see those 10 million people until they're all vaccinated.
You can see that Rockefeller tree from Zoom or from my TV. From a TV. I guess we didn't talk about this, but obviously Rachel, Matt, close friends, launched a huge thing this year with Prairie Surf Media and their whole movie business that they're you know, getting into and still working on. How, you know, I'm sure you knew about it long before.
I did. Well, that's interesting because Rachel and I and Matt and I are separately really good friends, and it's interesting. It's taken me the last year to really realize how great of friends they are with each other, and how long because Matt moved home first, and so he's a screenwriter that he helped us launch all these screenwriting seminars for Deadcenter that were getting 150 people. He's an amazing teacher of screenwriting. Like, he's awesome. And then Rachel moved home, and we met, I think, through Amy Janes, and she produced a short film with me last year called Send Me Wings, a Christian short that she co-wrote and starred in, and So as this whole thing is coming, her birthday was 2 days ago, so I just talked to her. But what Prairie Surf Media is going to do for Oklahoma Film is take it to the next level financially, because to get a $50 million movie means that you have sound stages where people are there for 8 weeks to 4 months at a time, and that's really when you and what that does is, unlike my movie, which employed 13 movies, then all of a sudden they're employing 150 people for 8 months on a superhero movie, and I think that is a godsend for Oklahoma, because the fact is, I think for Oklahoma Film, and I do believe this, I think for Oklahoma Film to really get a name for itself, it has to be a combination of local filmmakers like Mickey Reese, like Ryan Belgard, whoever, creating films that break out of the bubble. So like if Finding Carlos were to become on Netflix, that would help Oklahoma Film, and same with all of anyone's films. And then separately, it's providing enough full-time jobs for people to move here, like Atlanta. And right now, we have a lot of full-time jobs for Oklahomans. And I think what this will do is we'll start seeing this grow as an industry, just like aerospace is, right? They can't fill all the jobs in aerospace because there's so many jobs. And that's our hope with this studio. And I think Rachel and Matt are the perfect people to lead it, because they both worked very successfully in Hollywood before coming home, have those connections, and they have the right attitude for we're here to help Oklahoma Film go to the next level in a specific way, and I think that they will do that.
Yeah, I'm excited. It's going to be awesome to see what they can pull off, and like I said, with those connections, bringing Hollywood here, it's here's
the other thing that is such an exciting thing for me, and I give Tava Sofsky a lot of credit, who's the film commissioner. She is Governor Stitt and particularly Lieutenant Governor Pinnell have been wildly supportive of the film industry in a way that has not happened before that. When Brad Henry did a film, there's always been people interested. There's a vision, though, isn't it? But it was an art form on the side. And what the current administration does is acknowledge it as an industry that has a viable opportunity to employ Oklahomans. And I think that shift is the reason I think we'll be super successful. So 10 years from now, I think you will see Batman being filmed here, because all it takes is, a perfect storm of the right people in government and industry working together to create those jobs. Yeah,
and we have all the landscapes and everything, which for everyone listening, I'll post a link to that Prairie Surf Media podcast down below, and it's fascinating. But Lance, thanks for coming in.
Well,
Absolute
thank you
pleasure.
so much for having me. It's great to be back, and I appreciate what you do. I think what you're doing for Oklahoma is also awesome, because it's helping others understand how great it is, but as importantly, it's helping Oklahomans understand how great our state is, and I think that is a wonderful job you're doing.
I appreciate it. So deadcenterfilm.org to see the movie?
Deadcenterfilm.org. You can see it for free till December 31st.
All right. Thanks for listening and watching, guys. We'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
This podcast was presented by the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, who've been telling Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. Follow them online at oklahomahof.com and definitely on Instagram at oklahomahof. Catch you next episode. Cheers.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.